This is episode 85 of the Why Not Me podcast 10 things I learned from 3 months of no social media. I'm your host, Danita Brummer. I'm a wife, mom, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, and a life coach. And in this podcast, we talk about how to overcome our inner obstacles to endure this life well. So if you haven't entered the podcast giveaway yet, I know we still have several episodes before I announce it. I'm going to announce it on episode 100 and we're on 85. I'm going to be doing some bonus episodes. So it might speed up the process a little bit. But right now, I do appreciate the few people that have left podcast reviews and ratings. But right now, you have really good chance of winning. It's like more than 10% chance of winning. So I highly encourage you to get over there, listen to an episode, leave a 5-star rating, leave a review with at least one takeaway, and then head over to the Google form. The link is in the show notes and in the podcast description of this episode. So share with your friends to increase your odds of winning because your friend could win too. So fun. And if you don't know how to leave a review or a rating, really quickly, I'm going to tell you here. Number one, locate the podcast that you want to leave a review for. So open your app, go to the Why Not Me podcast, and make sure you're on the landing page for the podcast listing and not an individual episode. Like if you're searching, number two, scroll down to the bottom until you reach the section that says ratings and reviews and just click on one of the 5 stars. Click on the 5 stars to leave a rating and just click on write a review to leave a review. That is for an Apple device. I don't have an Android device, so I assume it's very similar, but I don't know how to do it on Android. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the 10 things I learned, honestly, probably more than 10 things I learned from 3 months of no social media. I think that social media is such a sore spot for many of us, especially for moms who want to be good examples to their kids. But it lights up those dopamine centers in our brain. So it is very addicting. So I hear a lot of people who would love to not leave social media entirely, but would love to like turn the dial way down on it in their lives. And I hope that this episode will give you some insights and some encouragement for that, if that's you. And if you're a business owner or a coach, I hope that this encourages you as well, because I'm going to talk a little bit about what I learned in relation to my business. So, the first thing, before I even get into the 10 things, I want to just talk about my background with social media. So, when Facebook first came out, I was pretty resistant to joining. My husband tends to be an early adopter. And so he hopped on Facebook very early, but I think it was a year or two before I got on Facebook. So I was a little wary from the get go. And then when Instagram came out, I was like, oh gosh, another platform. That's so stupid. But when I finally went to explore it, I was like, this is actually really cool because I love taking pictures, and Facebook, I don't know, it just became a place. And I don't know if there was kind of a transition that it went through, but it became a place that felt very stale and like full of ads. I have heard people complain about the ads on Instagram. So for me, I don't have that many ads, or at least it doesn't seem like a problem for me. But I quickly, once I got on Instagram, I quickly loved Instagram more than Facebook. I have not really tried any other social media apps. I was on Twitter for a while, didn't really engage there, so shut that down. So really my two are Facebook and Instagram. And over the years, especially, well, only with a smartphone, but it has become more and more of a draw and more addicting to me. And so I really saw it as an area of improvement in my life, but I also didn't want to let go of it yet. It's kind of like I knew I should, but I wasn't ready to. So the first lesson I learned from going off of social media for 3 full months was the power of making a decision. So, like I said, I knew I needed to. I knew it would help me. I knew it would be good for me, but I also didn't want to. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to let go of it yet. And so it was probably almost a year from the time when I told myself, you need to go off of social media for an extended period of time. I've gone off of social media for a day or a week at a time. I think I even had done 2 weeks at one point, but I had never done longer than 2 weeks. And I just decided, like, okay, this is a thing that the spirit is really whispering to me. And I also see that I don't want to. And so I gave myself lots of time. Like, I think it was like 9 or 12 months between the time where I was like, okay, I really need to do this and when I actually did it. So the power of making a decision is that I had known that I should or that it would be good for me, but I didn't actually decide to do it. So I went off of social media on April 17th, and it was, I think, about 2 to 3 weeks before that I had decided, okay, I'm actually going to do this. And then I had to wait. I had a Facebook group that it was like a paid group. So I was like, okay, I had promised this group. I'm not just going to like bump them off and all of that right in the middle. So I waited until the end of that group before I went off of social media. And there was some like settling, some peace that I received from actually deciding, okay, we're doing it and we're starting on this day. So there's that. And then number two is the power of allowing yourself time to be ready, right? Like I said, I wasn't ready. I didn't want to. I knew I should. I knew that it would be good for me, but I was just like, I don't want to do it yet. And so allowing myself those months, several months to kind of get ready, to wrap my mind around what would it look like? What would it feel like? And honestly, I had tried a lot of different things to not have to totally step away from social media, but to try to cut it back in my life. And one day I realized I just have to get off of social media for an extended period of time, and then maybe I can do it less than I'm doing it. And that has really been what I've experienced. But again, that I knew I needed to give myself some time, and I'm not the kind of person to just go cold turkey, to jump into something full force without really kind of moving toward it and preparing for it. I have been getting into human design lately, and this is something that I've learned from my human design is that I in certain areas of my life, I like change, but not in all areas, and I don't like change without kind of preparing for the change. And this is one way that I prepared for that change. I just let it simmer. Like, yes, I'm going to leave social media for an extended period of time. I don't know when. I don't know how long. I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but I am going to do it at some point. And finally, when I made that decision, it felt very much like peace to me. And I think it's partly because I allowed myself that extended period of time to kind of get ready for it. Lesson number 3 that I learned was how much more spacious and relaxed my life is without social media. So, I mean, I think I expected this on some level, but to really sink into this idea that I'm not getting on Facebook, I'm not getting on Instagram for 3 months. And what would I do instead? I was at the point, and this is a little bit embarrassing for me to admit, but I was at the point where if I looked at my stats on my phone, I was spending 4 to 5 hours a day on social media, or I think I was spending 4 to 5 hours a day on my phone. And the bulk of that was social media. And it's not like, I mean, yes, I was using social media for my business, but it's not like I was getting all kinds of awesomeness from that, right? And so opening up that that time in my life oh my gosh, I can't explain to you how much more space and time and just relaxation I experienced. Boredom, yes. At the beginning, I would say that I would have to remind myself, "Oh, we're not getting on social media." Like my fingers would go to the app where it used to be and it wasn't there. So it took like a week or so for that to kind of simmer down, but I just felt like I had time to think and time to be and time to feel and time to do things that I've been wanting to do for a long time and they've been lingering, kind of hanging over my mind, over my head. I went through my entire house and purged. Um, like I went through every drawer and cabinet and closet and just purged through things. And that felt so good. It's something that I've been wanting to do for several years. In fact, basically, since I started my business 3.5 years ago, I used to really stay on top of that kind of household stuff, like going through the paperwork and just going through things. And I hadn't done that. I think the whole 3.5 years I've had a business, and it was starting to really bother me. And so I did that and it took less time than I thought it would. And so I love that. And I just spent a lot more time in prayer, in meditation, walking, thinking, being with my people. And it's so much more how I want my life to feel. So I really did learn that I don't want social media in my life to the extent it was. Now, I've decided at the moment that I'm not cutting it out completely, but I'm only going to be using it really for my business. And I'm giving myself full permission to be inconsistent with posting and with, I might not be on stories. And I totally unfollowed everyone except for like 8 people. And I think 7 of them are prophets and apostles. So, there you have that. Number 4, what I learned is how tricky my brain is. So when I first went off social media, immediately I started watching more TV. And it wasn't like I don't watch hardly any TV. My family watches TV, but the only TV I watch is really over their shoulders. So sometimes I'll be like walking through the room and they'll have something on and my attention will get, drawn in and I'll stand there for a minute or two. But most of the time, I'm not even that interested. But as soon as I got off of social media, I would be like, oh my gosh, you're watching the show. I want to sit down and watch with you. And I never do that. Like, I rarely do that. I've had some shows that I've watched with my girls. That's been kind of fun to watch together, but that's been pretty rare. And I noticed my brain after a couple weeks being like, "Oh, I am spending way more time watching TV and like really getting sucked into the shows that my kids are watching when that normally wouldn't happen before." And so it was just so interesting to watch my brain be like, I want to be entertained, right? And so once I kind of had that realization, I was able to kind of control that a little bit more and notice. And honestly, I went into this whole thing thinking I'm not going to be perfect at that. And that's actually one of the things I learned later on. I'll talk more about that. So I had a lot of grace and I had a lot of um, just fluidity with it. I did get on social media a couple of times, a couple of times when, like, I don't even know, I would be reading something online and there would be a link and I didn't realize it went to like Instagram, right? So then that automatically opens my Instagram account. I would shut it down as soon as possible. But there were a couple times. There was one time when I wanted to contact somebody and I realized that the only way I knew how to contact them was through DMs on Instagram. So I did get on one time for that. But really, I did a pretty good job of staying off of it entirely. And um, I didn't allow myself to judge myself when I did get on it. It was probably less than 5 times in 3 months. So yes, my brain is really tricky. The other thing I noticed once I kind of cut back on the TV watching was that then it was summertime, my kids home. from school, and they started playing card games. And so I would sit down and I would play solitaire or I'd play a card game with them. And so that became the substitute for social media and TV. And so I'm just like noticing how tricky my brain is and how often it wants to go to um, something that's just sort of like a time filler and just kind of pass the time, but it's something that isn't really valuable to me. So I've been watching that. Number five thing that I learned from 3 months of no social media is that I could actually have a vision of how to use social media for my business, but not for my personal life. Like how to really cut back on social media, but not cut it out completely and to be able to use it when I want to. So if you know anything about human design, I have an open throat center, which means that I'm not really meant to be super consistent in my communications. I have struggled with this. I have told myself like I should post so many times a week or like I should have consistency and even like consistency in my branding and things like that. And having an open throat center means like I'm actually not designed to be that way. I'm designed to speak when I have something I want to say and to not speak when I don't have something I want to say. And so, kind of leaning into that and letting it be what it is and not following the quote unquote rules of like, this is how you get followers and letting social media be a tool that works for me and not me working for the tool. Right. I hear so many people talk about the kind of the rules and like how to use the system to like gain followers and do this and do that, and I'm just not into that. I use social media as a lighthouse. It's a place where you can come to find me, a new different, like you have the podcast here, I've got my website, but it's another place. And I know a lot of people are on social media, so it's not a bad thing. I do feel like the things I put out on there are very good, uplifting things. And so before I left social media for 3 months, I just I couldn't envision how could I be on social media for my business, but not on social media all the time. And now that I've stepped away for 3 months, I'm like, oh, that's so easy. I can totally be on social media for my business and not be on social media all the time. In fact, one of the easiest hacks is to take the app off of your phone and only get on Instagram or Facebook on the desktop. Now, I do recognize that there are limitations to what you can do. It's not easy to post stories from a desktop. So if that's something you really enjoy doing, you have to think about that. But for me and for my purposes, it's pretty okay to only post from the desktop and to only check in from the desktop. That's one. It just doesn't seem to be as much of a draw when I get on it on my computer versus on my phone. So that's one little thing I've learned. Number six lesson is the value of being imperfect. So I mentioned that I would talk more about this. I did not beat myself up when I did get on social media. My intention was to stay completely off it for 3 months. And I also didn't quite know if that was going to be possible or how intense the cravings would be. And so I really allowed myself to be imperfect with it and just be like, yeah, okay, we might get on once or twice, but it's way better than being on several hours a day. Right. And that felt so freeing to me. I've lived my life in the area of trying to be perfect all the time, right? And to kind of like tighten against the rules and make them stricter and stricter and stricter. And so it's actually good for me to kind of set some parameters and then break them a little bit. It helps me to kind of relax and stop judging myself and that kind of thing. So I really did learn the value of being imperfect and how you can think about the goal behind your intention. And that doesn't mean that it has to be exact in order to still reach that intention or that goal. Number seven lesson I learned is how I got more clear on how the spirit speaks to me And it was a huge lesson on trusting the Lord. Like those 9 months before I actually got off of social media, there were a lot of conversations between me and God on, Heavenly Father, how am I going to do this? Like it doesn't feel safe. It feels wrong. And I talked to him a lot, and he kept saying, just trust me, just trust me. And so it was a little bit of a leap of faith to leave social media. At least that's how it felt to me. Um, I didn't know, like, how would people find me in my business? And I have had nudges from the spirit on people will still find you, right? So maybe if you have a business, if you are using that against, against yourself, like, well, I can't leave social media because then how would people find me and how would I run my business and blah blah blah, all of that. Just trust that people will still find you. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to put yourself out into the world in a different way. Social media is a jungle, right? It is full of lots of different people and purposes. And I think one of the lessons of being a business owner is learning what works for you and not what works for the entire world. But what works for you is also going to work for your people. And so I have had people reach out to me, even though I wasn't on social media. And that felt very reassuring. It felt like nods here and there from Heavenly Father saying, like, listen, this can still work. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I can see so much more clearly how it can work. Lesson number 8 is that time to myself and time for caring for myself is so important. Before I got off of social media, I would almost immediately, first thing in the morning, get on my email and my social media. And it was one of the last things I did in the evening. And since being off of social media for 3 months and also being in a program that requires certain things, and one of the things is having a digital sunset and a digital sunrise, that time, first thing in the morning and last thing at night, is now time that I use to kind of fill my own cup and nurture myself and take care of myself. And it feels so amazing. And it has shifted a lot for me in my priorities and how I feel. Like I just feel so much better. I'm so much more spacious and so much more open and so much more creative. That was one of my hopes, that leaving social media would help me to feel more creative. And it totally did. Number 9 is that I learned what I really want when I want to get on social media. So, not allowing myself to get on social media those few times when I was like, oh, I just want to get on Instagram right now. What I realized was what I really want is connection. And I haven't yet been really good at turning that into a different kind of action, but even the realization of what I want when I get on social media is to connect. And it's a false connection when we get on social media. We're not really connecting in most cases. Yes, it is possible to connect deeply and fully with somebody on social media. And I've heard stories of that. And that's amazing and great. And I think that's the way social media should be used. But if you get on social media wanting connection and then you still feel like you're lacking it, then maybe those connections are going to happen in your real life, in the face to face interactions. And so, my hope is that I can replace that time of social media that I previously was on so much with actual real connections in real life. And number 10, and I'm sure there's so many other lessons that will come. Um, it's only been a week, a week and a half since I've gotten back on social media, since that 3 month mark passed. So I'm sure lots more lessons will come out of it. But number 10 is that I can get creative with still being on social media, quote unquote, without being on social media. So before I got off social media, I um, scheduled a whole bunch of posts. And I think it was about once a week, maybe twice a week in the beginning. And that was I felt good about that. I felt like, yes, I can be on there. I can still put things into the world, but I don't physically need to be on social media all the time. And so that's probably a shift that I'll make is creating posts and scheduling them, but then not really worrying about responding to comments. It's like I said, it's more like a lighthouse where I'm putting my light out. And yes, people are coming to me, but I don't need to spend a lot of time in my DMs or in the comment section. I can check in every once in a while and do that, but I can get creative with the content I publish and the schedule and all of that and being on there but not being on there, right? Okay, I hope that is helpful for you. I want to give you permission that if social media is an obstacle for you, if you notice that you're on it all the time and you don't want to be on social media all the time, I just want to encourage you that taking an extended break is okay, that it actually is really good for your brain and for your soul, and it teaches you a lot of things and you can come back to it. It's not like all or nothing, right? You don't have to be on social media all the time or never on social media. There's some in between there. Um, so yeah, I just want to encourage you and also I just want to encourage you to really listen to that voice. I think we're seeing a shift in our culture of needing to step away from some of the platforms that feel overwhelming, that feed the compare and despair, all of that, right? And so I see a lot of people stepping away. I follow someone named uh, Alexandra Franzen. I think she calls herself Alex. And she stepped away from social media like 7 years ago. And she has a really successful business that doesn't involve any social media. And so that's like so encouraging to me. I might go that direction in the future. For now, I'm going to stay on there a little, but I have in the last week and a half since I've given myself permission to be on social media, I've been on way, way less than before this 3 month sabbatical. So it feels like a reset. It feels like a fresh start, and I'm excited about that. Okay, that's enough for now, and so are you. If this episode encouraged you, please head over to danitabrummer.com and schedule a free session with me. And don't forget to enter the podcast giveaway. Um, yeah. All right. Until next time, go be you and follow the spirit.